Hey, it's Andrew and Nguyen, and you're about to watch a virtual book talk that I taped from my home for my latest cookbook, Evergreen Vietnamese. Hope you enjoy it. What I'm going to stand back and show you is this is my kitchen. These are all the ingredients that I've pulled from my pantry that I think, we can kind of discuss today. And what I'd like to do is talk for roughly like 30, 40 minutes about various ingredients that you may find to be essential in Evergreen Vietnamese. And then while we're doing that, if you have questions, you are more than welcome to pose them in the chat. And my husband, Rory, who is the wizard minder of this session, he'll like scream. But I'm just so happy this worked out. I can't go everywhere to do book events because honestly, it's so expensive and we all have different schedules and we live all over the country. Thank goodness that Vietnamese food is not something isolated to the coast, for example. And there are plenty of people all over the country. I've traveled to Ohio, to Michigan, and to many other places where you wouldn't think that people would be interested in Vietnamese food, but in all honesty, this country is a lot different than when my family arrived here in 1975, and people are really interested in Asian cooking and ingredients. And the reason why I wanted to focus on ingredients today is that really is the thing that kind of trips people up when they're making food that is unfamiliar with them. And with Asian food, it just seems like it's so mysterious in many ways, but it doesn't have to be. And the thing with Evergreen Vietnamese is that it builds on my prior book, Vietnamese Food Any Day. That book was like no Asian market shopping required, but I wanted to push you a little because honestly, like more people are shopping at Asian markets, and but at the same time, you don't want to all the time. And at the same time, regular supermarkets are much, much better well-stocked now than ever. So let's, talk a little bit more about the book. And so when you open up Evergreen Vietnamese, you'll find that at the front part of the book, there is all of this section called Key Advice on Equipment and Ingredients. And to my best ability, I had really kept things at a minimum because I feel like the book was constructed during the pandemic, and we did a lot of substitutions, and I really wanted to make this a book filled with recipes and ideas that you can really incorporate into your repertoire without making it like a really daunting thing. So at the front end, you're going to find pieces of it, this kind of information. And the first thing I want to talk about is rice, because in most of my books, I start off the recipe chapters talking about snacks and stuff. And this is a book that's about healthful eating. It's about my modern interpretations of traditional Vietnamese plant-based cooking. And normally when we write cookbooks, we like put the rice chapter in the back because it's like a side dish. But my editor said to me, "You're like so into rice, so why don't you put the rice chapter up front?" And I was like, all right, fine. So let's start talking about rice, because honestly, of all of the ingredients in the Vietnamese kitchen, rice is like the most important. And if you ask me, Andrea, you can only have 2 ingredients, what would it be on a, desert island, whatever, you're stuck somewhere, I'd say rice and fish sauce, because I can forage for the rest. And so let's talk about rice first. and rice paper. So you can typically find this brand at a lot of mainstream supermarkets in the Asian section, right? It's a pretty good brand of rice paper. And the way that I consider rice paper these days, you're going to see that rice paper doesn't always contain rice. It's got like tapioca and rice, and tapioca first oftentimes. So this brand is okay. It is sort of like a medium thickness of rice paper. And you'll be fine with making like unfried rolls or grilled rolls. But for all of the recipes in the book in Evergreen Vietnamese, and in fact, of all the recipes that are in my cookbooks in general, I'm basing it on this brand, which is Three Ladies brand. And it's a widely distributed brand of rice products. And the reason why I like it is that it's sturdy. There are brands of rice paper out there that are going to be thinner. They'll rip, they have more tapioca. They think it's like built for like low carb eating. But honestly, if you want a rice paper that is easy to work, you want this guy here. This brand is a Vietnamese like Little Saigon brand that is just as good as this one. But it's a little bit harder to find. And some Vietnamese people swear by Three Bamboo. This is Three Ladies. So oftentimes, like, these ingredients happen in threes. Why? I'm unclear, but that's what people are into. And why do I like this rice paper other than its sturdiness? Because you can manipulate it. So in Evergreen Vietnamese, one of the cool things that I love about it are these crazy hacks that are part of the book. These are modern things. This is a book that is extremely modern and creative. So for example, the cover recipe. These are steamed rice noodle rolls called bánh cuốn. So if you've been to Cantonese dim sum, you will have had steamed rice noodle rolls that are like kind of thick and filled with shrimp. The Vietnamese version is a pain in the ass to make, and they're very thin. And typically they're steamed over a piece of fabric set on a pot of hot water, or they're done in a skillet. But this recipe here, the cover recipe, requires simply over soaking rice paper and then filling it and then very, very briefly cooking it. And it is something that Vietnamese cooks in Vietnam and elsewhere are doing. It's very low key. And I'm telling you this is that we oftentimes think of cuisines like Vietnam's as like being stuck somewhere. And like there's only one method of doing it. And Vietnamese expats think that way too. But it's really not true, because there's stuff happening within the Vietnamese community all over the world and in Vietnam. And this is a modern hack, a modern approach. But what you need is a relatively thick rice paper. And either Three Ladies or Three Bamboo work really well. And there is guidance in the ingredient discussion as to what you want to, like, you can gauge in terms of the back of the label as to how thick the rice paper is, because you do it by weight. But that's like a little bit geeky. What else can you do with sturdy rice paper aside from working it really easily for rice paper rolls and for those steamed rolls? You can transform it. So there are the rolls again. That's in the rice chapter. But you can also oven fry it for this. So these are typically deep fried and very, very difficult and tricky to make well. But oven frying is fabulously easy. It's a little lean, but it comes out every time with no messes. You can also grill rice paper. And grilled rice paper is kind of like a strange stoner dish that a lot of young people like. And I had it on the streets of Da Nang, and I was like, I'm going to add that to the book because that's really like what people are eating in Vietnam. Is like fun street food. And I really wanted to add that to this book to reflect what's going on in Vietnam. But the thing is that you can totally do it with like vegetarian or vegan approaches. So that's, in terms of rice paper. And I want you to remember the brand Three Ladies or Three Bamboo, because you're going to see it again in some of these other products, mainly like noodles. So these are boon rice noodles. So these are the ones that you would use for boon rice noodle bowls. And if you make traditional rice paper rolls, you're going to slide this in there. And whenever you go to buy rice paper or rice products, whether it's actual rice or rice paper or rice noodles, the Three Ladies it's just very consistent. And there are also these guys, which are very fine rice vermicelli noodles called bánh hỏi. And they are a new thing that have come on the scene for Vietnamese cooks, where it does not require any tricky dance moves. You pour hot water over it to rehydrate it, and then it's served with green chili oil. Now, the thing is that, let's say you don't want to shop at an Asian market, right? Or online. So what are you going to do? You can go to a regular supermarket, and a brand like this, Golden Star, for my fun means rice noodle in Cantonese, will work out just fine. It's going to cost you more, true, but this particular brand is quite good. And this is Sai Fun, which are cellophane noodles, which Vietnamese people use quite a lot in fillings and in soups and stuff. And again, you're gonna find the Three Ladies pop up at a lot of Asian markets. These are the noodles I use for pho, and also like the brand for stir fries and pan frying and stuff. So again, those Three Ladies pop up. And let's see what else. Rice. If you can't get to an Asian market, again, this is try to get jasmine rice from Thailand, because for some reason the jasmine rice in Thailand, they've got a lock on the variety, the breed or something. It just tastes really, really wonderful, and it's fragrant, much more than the jasmine rice that is grown domestically here in the United States. And another thing that people often get tricked up about is rice flour. I don't use it often in this book, but when I use it, I'll either say like just regular rice flour or like a Thai or Asian rice flour. So when I'm talking about regular rice flour, what are you talking? Bob's Red Mill. It's not Asian, and this is more like the Asian rice flour, but there are differences. This is Thai rice flour. This is what's called a dry mill rice flour. That means that they're just grinding the grains. This is where they're taking long grain rice, soaking it, so rehydrating it, grinding it, and then drying it. You cannot use Japanese sweet rice flour, Johanna, instead of these. The reason, and thank you for asking me that. Like mochiko, totally different rice flour, because mochiko has a lot more amylopectin. It's chewier, it's sweeter, it's gummy. So it's going to behave very differently in recipes such as these guys here. So these are Vietnamese rice crepes. They're from Hue, and they're these crunchy rice crepes. They're not bun sao, sizzling rice crepes. They're crunchy Hue rice crepes, kind of like a crunchy fried taco. And to make them, there's no coconut milk involved, but you want to use a Thai rice flour, or in that particular recipe, because we're all into substitutions, I've got a hack for you to soak rice too. and grind it up in a blender. You can also use white rice flour to do it. And I discuss in that recipe the differences in the outcomes. The easiest one is to just use the tight rice flour. So there's a difference. The other thing, Johanna, to address your question about mochiko sweet rice flour. So Bob's Red Mill has that too, for example, and I believe it's very similar to the grains that Coder Farms grinds up and sells in the box for mochiko. But that particular rice flour is a dry mill rice flour. So I can like talk more at length about this in a post on Pass the Fish Sauce, but there's a difference between dry milling and wet milling rice. So a dry milled rice flour is going to be coarser. A wet one, where the rice has been soaked and the starch is softened, is going to be much finer and powdery, practically by comparison. So it's almost talc-like, that you could like, pat on your skin to take off the shine. So there's two different flours, and they're going to behave differently in batters, and depending on how they're milled. And then on top of that, if you've eaten like sticky rice, you know the difference in sticky rice versus like a regular long grain rice. So sticky rice versus like jasmine rice or Texas long grain. And that's all about the ratio of starches and sugars in the rice grains. So I caution you, do not substitute sweet rice flour for regular rice flour. And because unfortunately, your recipes are going to not turn out. And I've bought the wrong rice flour, to tell you the truth, and I emphasize this a lot. So as a standard for rice flour, when it's made out of long grain rice, the Thai brands and Vietnamese brands, regular rice flour it's labeled as rice flour, and it's labeled in a red label. When it is a sticky rice that's been soaked and milled, it is labeled in green. So, and it will say glutinous rice flour. It won't say sweet rice flour. That's for like Japanese rice flour. So there's a difference. So just remember that. And you've got the book. What you can do is, like take a photo or something of the entry for rice flour, and remember that no glutinous or sweet rice flour is used in Evergreen Vietnamese. I've used it in my other books, like the dumpling book.
But Pratima is asking a question about the Indian rice flours you'd find in an Indian market.
Yes. So those would be milled from grains of like, say, basmati. And I am unclear how those are milled, whether they're dry or wet milled. So the only way, so that's the difference, Fatima. And so you would just have to try. For like those crepes recipes that I mentioned, one of the coolest things that you could do, honestly, is to get raw rice, soak it, and then put it in your blender and grind it up for the batter. That actually makes like a most stupendous crepe, because you're tasting the freshest rice as if you were to have made it like decades ago in Vietnam. And that's a very traditional method, except you didn't have to grind the rice yourself. A high-speed blender did that for you. And how cool is that? You could like soak rice, grind it up, and make it into this like lovely batter that you could like make these crepes from. But when you're in a hurry, and for consistency's sake, this is pretty darn good. So that's pretty much like for the rice discussions. Oh, and so this is broken rice. otherwise known uh, in the South as like middlings. And it used to be like a very inexpensive thing in Vietnam because there's just like the leftover broken grain rice. But now like it costs more because we actually like break it in on purpose. And why? Because it's kind of nubby like couscous. It's quite good. I only have one recipe or two recipes that use it, but if you don't have it, you can use regular long grain rice. And again, because I'm a creature of comfort, I use the Three Ladies brand because I know it's consistent.
You have a great you have a great question about making rice.
Oh,
So someone here has a cuckoo
oh,
and says that they're overwhelmed by the choices. What are your recommendations for the style of cooking rice in a rice cooker?
well, if you all are unfamiliar with cuckoo, let me bring ours out. Hold on a moment. Cuckoo is a rice cooker from Korea. And it cooks using either pressure cooking or non-pressure cooking. And when I use this particular cuckoo, which was a gift to me, because I really don't know how to use a rice cooker very well, but this particular cuckoo does quite a good job, and we typically use it on the non-pressure cooker setting, because the pressure cooker setting creates a rice that is so interesting, chewy in that way that Koreans like chewy rice. And you have to play around with cuckoo. But we cook our brown jasmine rice in cuckoo on like non-pressure for on the multi-grain setting actually. But when it is pressure cooked, I just use the regular white rice setting and like just let it go to town. But cuckoo is like kind of expensive, but if you want like the best, one of the best rice cookers, it's quite lovely. I hope that answers your question.
And as Maya pointed out, it sings beautifully in Korean. Very amusing.
It at the end of the whole deal, it will say cuckoo. And so it's quite something.
You have another question here from Joanna.
Yeah,
Do you ferment ground rice as you would in Indian dosas?
very only in certain instances would I ferment rice. Like for if I were to make the if I were to be a vendor, a professional like person who made these from scratch and I was steaming them over fabric and stuff, that's when I would ferment the rice and manipulate it so that it's got some chew. That said, I'm going to tell you that people are still adding tapioca starch and I think a little wheat starch to those batters to manipulate the overall texture. So it's not, the fermentation alone is not going to do it like with dosas, because it's because of this steaming business. You've got to really play with it to get the texture to be lithe and pliable and cook over steam. So Mickey says, yes.
Go ahead. Mickey's question is, I like the smoky flavor of cooking rice in a donabe. How do you normally make your rice?
We make it in a very thick stainless steel pot on the stove, or when I'm lazy, I turn on my friend, and I'll just, for kicks, plug her in. And has been canceled. So she talks to you, and she actually like was kind of behaving, but she loves to say things like, please take the do container off and all that, or time to stir. Yeah, so a donabe is really great. I have several of them, They're a little bit tricky to use, but similar to a clay pot. If you don't want to spend a lot of money on a fancy donabe that costs like $200 or $300, a Chinese clay pot that costs you less than $10 is a great way to make rice as well. But starting out, just use like a heavy duty stainless steel pan. Practice your rice in the same pan over and over, and you will like not have to measure the water after a while. I saw a question from Kate, but it just flew by. Sorry, Kate. Rory will monitor the question. What else? All right. So I've got the other thing that I want to talk about that's sort of like the elephant in the room is fish sauce, right? Because I mentioned two things. So I primarily use these two brands of fish sauces. In my home right now, I have probably like 25 different brands of fish sauces because that's sort of like my thing. That's why the newsletter is called Pass the Fish Sauce. But I taste different kinds of fish sauce all the time. And even just the other day, my friend and restaurateur and chef Pim Tetraman Vivit, who owns Nari and Kin Cow, which are Michelin-starred restaurants in San Francisco, we did a fish sauce tasting, and it was interesting how she had her Thai opinions, I had my Vietnamese opinions. So there is a lot of variation. But for cooking Vietnamese food, and food in general, when I want really good fish sauce, I use either one of these. Sun is absolutely delicious. It's a little bit hard to find, although Whole Foods has been started to stock it. And I know a lot of you are into three crabs. It's good too. You know, use what it's not the end. You don't have to use three crabs all the time. It's got a higher sodium level. It's also got sugars and yeast, wheat extract in there. So then it's kind of mimicking the fish sauce flavor in Vietnam, which oftentimes has MSG, and it has had MSG in the Nuoc Mam coming out of Vietnam, like way before my family left in 75. So this is also quite nice and sold at a lot of regular supermarkets in the Asian section. Dynasty imports stuff, and it's got a little touch of sugar in it. But otherwise it's just anchovy extract and salt. So if you're into natural, wholesome cooking, look for all the time in any ingredient that you purchase, the least number of items listed in the ingredient section. Yes, Sun and Red Boat are both gluten-free. And Red Boat, and I think Sun claims that it is kosher too. Yeah, it says no shellfish, but they don't have kosher certification. Red Boat used to have a kosher certified version. In fact, I was at their facility in Vietnam when they got kosher certified. It's pretty cool. Now, if you are a vegan, what are you going to do? And so in Evergreen Vietnamese, I suggest that you make your own vegan fish sauce. And it doesn't take very long. And it doesn't require a lot of unusual ingredients either. And I formulated this because I wanted something that people could make that was wholesome, so preservative free, and tasted a lot better than this. Because people have asked me, Andrea, what do you think about this product? It's sold at Whole Foods. It's just not very tasty. And I will be honest about it, because it's not as salty. You can't really use it as a one-to-one trade with regular fish sauce, and it tastes more like soy sauce. It does not taste like fish sauce. And so this is fish sauce that I make using, you've got the recipe, it's on page 29, pineapple juice, seaweed, MSG or mushroom seasoning granules, sea salt, and Marmite. And I think the probably the most difficult thing for people to get is Marmite. And I got this at my little indie grocer down the way. And it's yeast extract and it's natural. It lends an extra umami depth in the vegan nukmam, and it also lends a very handsome color. And when you're going through the book, you're going to see 3 kinds of seaweed used. And I don't use anything fancy, okay? This brand is very affordable and sold at lots of, oh, Ty says you can find Marmite at Cost Plus. That is awesome, because Whole Foods used to carry it and then they stopped, or my local Whole Foods anyway. Oh, and Prathima says it's at Publix. I love Publix down in the South. Such a good chain.
You have a couple of other questions you've missed, because the ones obviously it just pops up. So if Andrea happens to look at the screen when you type in, then she sees it. Earlier on, Christine had asked a question here about when you talk about fish sauces and other jarred ingredients, can you say how you store them after opening?
Sure. Okay, Christine, back to that. Fish sauce will only go bad. It doesn't really go bad. It degrades. And so how you're going to arrest that degradation, because we know we all oxidize after a while, right? Stick it in the fridge and make sure every single time that you use it, you cap it really tightly. And even though it may not have that initial fragrance over time, it will still have the flavor of good fish sauce. And you may wince at my talking about the initial aroma of fish sauce. Good fish sauce, when you open up the bottle at the beginning, it's going to smell like dry porcini mushroom. That's what the good stuff smells like to me. And the flavor is going to have an umami-ness that's slightly briny, but it's not necessarily like super fishy. And so I store any of my fish sauces that have no preservative in the refrigerator. And ones that do have a preservative, like say 3 crabs, I'm going to, this guy's okay sitting out. And if you think about it, fish sauce is made to be used in tropical climates. And so, you know, we're talking intense heat and humidity. And the worst that it can get is that it will get like salt crystals in the bottle. Big deal. Or if it gets too salty, just use a little bit less. I used to tell people like, oh my God, if it gets like too crystallized, you know, it's time for you to throw it away. But I've kind of like gotten off that particular approach over time. But if with any ingredient, if you don't use it very often, you just slide it into the fridge. And you don't need all of these different fish sauces to make Vietnamese food. You just need 1 bottle. I just happen to have a lot of space, and this is my career. Okay. Similarly, like with the Marmite, I keep that out in my cupboard, but because it's pretty intense stuff, and I've never had any problems with it going bad. With soy sauces, similar thing as fish sauce, you just need 1. If you wanted to go 2 different kinds, then I would suggest going with a regular soy sauce. And maybe if you do a lot of Chinese cooking, a lot of Vietnamese cooking, getting a dark one too. So soy sauces are not all the same, because it's used in a lot of different East Asian and Southeast Asian cuisines. So I happen to be a Pearl River person, and definitely, Susan, You can use it in non-Vietnamese recipes. Yes. Pearl River Bridge is a Cantonese company, and their soy sauce has no sugar in it. I would rather control the sugar in my cooking than to let someone else dictate it to me. But if you use, say, a kikkoman, then this is a little bit more made in a Japanese style. It's gonna be a little darker in color. So just be aware of that, but overall it's not going to be as dark as some of the other soy sauces. Soy sauces coming out of China are like really wonderful these days. If you shop at the Mala market, for example, there's like some gorgeous fish sauce, soy sauces coming out of Sichuan that they carry. And Pearl River Bridge, like everybody else, has different grades. So here's a premium light version. Light does not mean low sodium. Light means light in color. I don't use low sodium soy sauces unless I'm on assignment and the media outlet says they only want to use low sodium soy sauce. I want you to know, I do not use soy sauce and fish sauce on their own. They're always used with salt. So if you are using low sodium soy sauces, number one, you may just like it. But if your flavors are not salty enough, not savory enough, then by all means add a little salt at the end. And if you're watching your sodium, what you can do is maybe try a salt, try a finishing salt that's a little coarser, because it'll hit your palate differently when you're eating and provide like hints of saltiness without it being salty all over. So you may end up using a little less. If you're open to it, use a little MSG, because that's definitely lower in sodium. And another thing that Vietnamese people are really into is Maggi, or as that's how we call it, but in America we call this Maggi. And this is the Chinese version. There are all different kinds of versions of Maggi seasoning sauce. If you're not into it, then Bragg liquid aminos is certainly quite nice. I keep these guys because they have preservatives. I keep them in the cupboard, not in the fridge. And if you shop at hardcore Vietnamese markets, there's even a version made in Vietnam that is being exported to the United States. Okay, so sriracha. Everyone thinks that Vietnamese food can't be Vietnamese food without sriracha. It's not even Vietnamese, it's Thai. So here it is. But I really love Viet chili sauce, which you can make from a recipe in the book. It's so darn simple. And you can just make the Viet chili sauce with like ingredients at the supermarket. And if you want to make it a little smooth and thick, then add a little xanthan gum, but you don't have to add xanthan gum if you don't want to. And what's the difference between Viet style chili sauce versus sriracha? This has a little tiny bit of tomato, and it's a little bit sweeter, and it's not as vinegary hot as an assertive and kind of like overwhelming as sriracha can be. And this really goes with a lot of Vietnamese flavors. Because Vietnamese food is not super duper hot. Vietnamese food is, as I oftentimes describe it, rolling hills, not peaks and valleys. The other thing that you're going to need is once in a while, okay, not for every single recipe, you'll see hoisin sauce come up. I really try to like minimize the kinds of processed sauces used. So there's not any oyster sauce in Evergreen Vietnamese. Whenever I wanted an oyster sauce flavor, I formulated it using soy sauce and a little fish sauce, whether that's regular or vegan, and sugar and a little sesame oil. But when you're looking for hoisin sauce, this is what you're looking for. You are not looking for the hoisin sauce in a squeeze bottle. That is hoisin sauce formulated for eating with pho. It is not for cooking. So this is much salty, it's much thicker, is what you want to use for chashu. And it is going to just have a lot more complexity than the one that you see when you go to a pho restaurant and it's sitting on the table for you to squeeze. And if you don't want to use this or don't have it, and you don't want to use it because it's got wheat in it, in the book, I always have hacks, because we're into substitutions in our lives these days using red miso. So look for that. You can get red miso at different levels, and darkness. The darker the miso is, the closer you're going to get to hoisin. And so, think about these things when you're cooking. Another ingredient that I push in the book is fermented bean curd. This is advanced cooking. It's like graduate level Vietnamese and Chinese vegan cooking. This is the equivalent of like blue cheese. It's absolutely delicious. But if you don't get this particular brand or other Taiwanese brands, and I will tell you this, this is made in Taiwan. I mentioned it in my book, and because the book was printed in China, in mainland China, they said that I had to remove all other, every single reference to Taiwan or Hong Kong in the book, because the Chinese were like, that's just how we want it. And the book could be delayed if the references were not removed. So when you go to buy fermented bean curd, otherwise known as jiao in Vietnamese, look for the Taiwanese brands because they just tend to taste better. And if you don't have it, one thing that comes close is white miso. And believe it or not, Whole Foods started selling very good white miso recently. And it's a hack. It's a different flavor, different texture, but very similarly, it's fermented, mild tasting soybean product. So they're very, very similar. And another thing I wanted to go over, sesame oil. I keep a very large quantity. You don't have to, but Japanese sesame oils are just so tasty. Toasted sesame oil. Whole Foods has great toasted sesame oil too. I keep this in the fridge. So it just like really arrests the flavor very nicely. Finally, let's talk about mushrooms. Dry shiitakes are not, I don't use them interchangeably with fresh shiitakes. Like if I don't have dry shiitake, I'm not going to I know that if I substitute fresh, it's going to be a different experience. Okay, so try not to do that unless you absolutely have to, or I say so in a recipe. But these are dry shiitakes and they have little cracks on them. And these are mid-range. So we're talking like, say, $13 for 12 ounces or something. And if you get them and they cost more and they're whiter in color, they tend to be a little bit too thick. So if you go like mid to high price level for the shiitakes, it's kind of like a nice point to be at. And rehydrate them overnight in a really long soak so that you get like the really great texture and flavor and aroma. I know a lot of recipes say, oh, just pour hot water over and let them soak for 15 minutes. That's like for really thin, flavorless shiitake mushrooms that you would like get at a supermarket. But for vegetarian cooking, vegan cooking, where you really are using mushrooms as like a source of umami, get like some good stuff because they're going to repay you in terms of flavor, and spend some time to soak them. And once they're soaked, in the book, it's like there's a tip, like you can hold them in the fridge for like a really long time. The other one of the other mushrooms that are a little bit tough for people to figure out, this is black fungus, otherwise known as wood ear mushroom. And I spent a lot of time writing those like that one paragraph in the ingredient discussion about black fungus, because they're kind of hard to buy in the sense that they're all called black fungus. None of them are described as woodier. And so unless you're buying them fresh, and they have different thicknesses. So these are the gray ones that are the most delicate and thin. If you get, say, the brown ones, then they're sort of middle of the thickness and have a little bit crunch. And if they are super white on one side, then they're like really thick. So you can choose with the thickness when you're buying the woodier mushrooms or black fungus. And I think I have gone over all of my the ingredients that I wanted to talk about. So
You have a question from Cynthia about any subs, even if they're not the same, for fermented soy products for a soy allergy.
okay. If you have a soy allergy, like say for hoisin sauce, because that's like the one that I would think would be the trickiest.
Well, she asked about the fermented soy products in general. So,
Oh, like with, well, okay. Like, so you can't eat soy sauce. Let's talk about soy sauce then. If you can't have soy sauce, then I would all right. All right. This apparently is not made with soy. It is wheat, gluten, wheat, no soy. Also, la choy, soy sauce, which my family ate when we first came to the United States, is not made with soy sauce. It's made with wheat. So hopefully if you have a soy allergy, you don't have a wheat one too. There's like liquid aminos, which I haven't really like found one that I liked. You could play around with it and add more salt to it if you like, but I just haven't found a wheat version. You can also use like vegan fish sauce or fish sauce, and instead of soy sauce. It's going to be a little bit different, but you know, for many people in Vietnam, Maggi, this here, I think this though is made with soybeans. It is, but for many people, Maggi seasoning sauce in Vietnam is considered soy sauce. So if you have a soy allergy, that may be one option for you. And I hope that helps. That's a tricky one. So are there any other questions? Because we're running out of time. Can also sub tamari, but tamari is soy base. So if you have a soy, yeah, Cynthia, la choy. Yep. And wheat's good for you. Yeah. So tamari sometimes has wheat and sometimes it doesn't. Tamari is also a lot darker than like light soy sauce. So it's going to impact your the color of your food. So be aware of all this. You can use a soy sauce that you like and really love, but you really need to know the difference. And sometimes people are looking at recipes in the book and they're looking at the photo and they may go, oh my God, my food doesn't look like hers. But it tastes good. That's what really matters. So keep that in mind.
Johanna has asked a question which could be your closing. What is your favorite recipe in the book to cook?
Oh, wow. There's this I love all of them, to tell you the truth, and they all represent something that is some experience I had during the the years that it took to put the book together and have some meaning. But I really I love the crunchy rice crepes because they just smell up the house so wonderfully. It's a little bit of a project to make that, but the other thing that I love that's like on the simple side is the grilled eggplant with garlicky green onion oil. Um, and that's a really simple recipe. And I will tell you this, Trader Joe's tends to have consistently very good globe eggplants. The other day, I just found two of these chashu baked bao in the freezer, and we had them for lunch, and they were so good. And so there's a lot, and the pho recipes, the bún bò Huế recipes, and the hủ tiếu recipes, they're fabulous for vegan options for noodle soups. And those three recipes, I'm quite proud of them because they allow you to experience the regional differences in Vietnamese cooking by way of three noodle soups. And if you are into eating, if meat's okay with you, the chicken vegetable pho is really cool because you can you can learn how to build umami with vegetables as well as just a little chicken. And I saw that there was another question that flew
Well,
by.
one of the questions Kathy had was, will you be doing one of these Zoom meetings for cooking?
Um, you mean like with a demo kind of thing?
Right, yeah.
That's like really hard. One of the things that I am seriously thinking about is doing online cooking classes. A number of you have taken cooking classes from me in person, and it's the space where I used to teach in person is no longer available, and I can't like and I'd love to be able to reach people in other areas. I may do some simple demos for the book, but it may just be easier to have cooking classes and then have a little menu that or a little cook along with something for folks. So let's see.
Someone wrote twice a question about techniques to prevent Vietnamese summer rolls cold, unfried, prevent the rice sticker paper from sticking together when storing in the fridge for a few hours or transporting. Don't you mention that in the recipe?
I sure do. Thank you for being such a good and mindful husband. There are instructions that one of the cool things that we did in this book was to have these 2-page explainers. So there's one, they're pointers. There's one, for example, for lemongrass, so that you can read up on all the different aspects of prepping lemongrass. But for the rice paper rolls, I condensed basically all that I know in 2 pages to walk you through how to make the rolls and how to store the rolls right here. So when you look in the book on page 96, you will see one section in the second column called How to Store the Finished Rolls. So I hope that will provide you with all the information that you need. And then there's also step-by-step on how to make pretty rolls too. Okay, so
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you so much. And I so enjoyed gathering with you all. You had great questions about ingredients, and cook from the book. Send me photos on Instagram or even in email. And please, if you love the book, write a nice comment on Amazon, because strangely, it really helps so much these days. And I'll see you on Pass the Fish Sauce. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for attending. Thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot out of the session. Get yourself a copy of the book.